guys, this is Brian with Bokashi.com back in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and it's fall. It's the first couple of weeks of fall, and this is about the time of the year when you want to start rehabilitating your soil, redoing your beds. You may be getting ready for a winter crop, or you may be going fallow over the winter. And I want to show you a little tip or trick that I use here and why I do it. If you notice this bed here, this is the bed that I've made a bunch of videos on showing how to bury Bokashi to actually do the process. And this plant that you see in here is a pea. That's actually Alaska pea. It's an early growing pea. It likes the cold weather. It's one of the earliest sprouting peas that you can get, but it's a legume. And the legumes, or the family of beans like that, have a unique ability to go ahead and fix nitrogen from the air and put it into their roots. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking this soil and I've planted it, and I'm going to allow these plants to grow up, and as they grow up they're going to make flowers. At the time that they make flowers, I'm going to cut them down. I'm not growing these to eat the beans. I'm actually growing them to put the nitrogen back in the soil. So what I'm going to do is when they flower, I will cut these down, and then I will turn all this into the soil. And by doing so, I'm going to get an idea of how my soil actually is doing. If the roots of these plants are nitrogen fixing, and I see a lot of nitrogen fixation, that's noticed by little pinkish nodules. You'll see little balls, little BB looking balls, and they're a little bit pinkish or flesh toned. If I see a lot of that nitrogen nodules, I know that my soil was low in nitrogen itself. If when I pull the roots up and I turn it in, I notice that there's not a lot, that's one of two things. Either I didn't have a lot of the nitrogen fixing bacteria on the roots, or the soil itself had a good amount of nitrogen. The plant's only going to work as hard as it has to work, and the reason you cut it when it flowers is because the plant is taking the nitrogen out of the air and storing it up, kind of like saving food for when the flowers come up, because the next thing is going to seed. And the highest amount of energy of any plant above the ground is in the seed. It's the fruit has a high amount, but the seed has the highest amount. So by cutting this down, when the plants go to flower, all those little nodules are sitting there on the roots of this cut down plant, and it was getting ready to be turned into the seeds. The plant was storing it all. So what I've done effectively is I've had the plant work for me, store all this free nitrogen in the soil, and by cutting it down, I'm turning in organic matter. I'm getting an idea of how much nitrogen's in my soil. Like I said earlier, the plant, if it doesn't need a lot of nitrogen, or there's a lot of nitrogen in the soil itself and it doesn't need to make it, it won't make a lot. If it's really deficient in nitrogen in the soil, then the plant will go about making as much as it can for those purposes. So now I have a barometer. It gives me an idea of how my soil's doing. Once I do that and I turn in the greens on the top and I mix up the roots on the bottom, that's a fine time for me to put my Bokashi in my Bokashi Compost. So now I'm actually mixing in fresh organic matter, fermented organic matter. I have a lot of nitrogen, or I'll have the right amount of nitrogen in the soil. So what I'm doing now, instead of waiting for that time to just put in some fresh Bokashi, there's another way to do it. And we'll come over here to my soil generator. Looks pretty high-tech and fancy, and it really is. My soil generator is just a container that has the bottom cut out of it, and I put my Bokashi fermented matter in there about 10 days ago. Let me pull this to the side. I pulled it out, or put it in about 10 days ago, and that was the fermented matter that you're going to see in a bucket. It still looks like food, and only after 10 days of being in this box, this is the soil that you have. It's all pretty well broken down. It's really hard to see any distinct food pieces. This would have been a piece of food. If I crush it up a little bit, you may see a little bit of matter in there. So that big bucket, that 20-pound bucket of food that looked exactly like food, only it was broken down and fermented by the microbes, now looks like soil. Here's another piece, and I'll end up breaking these guys up. But effectively, I can sit there and use this as compost right now. So I'm going to take my raised bed after I cut down my peas, and I use the nitrogen and the greens, and then I'm going to put my Bokashi compost in with the soil too. Now I have a lot of organic matter, I have a lot of biological life, have a lot of activity, and I'm recycling food and I'm building my soil. So that's just a little tip or trick that I use. Whenever you're rehabilitating the ground, go ahead and put in a little cover crop, cut it down once it gets to the nitrogen fixing stage, and then while you're turning it in, go ahead and turn in some Bokashi. I could have turned in fresh Bokashi right out of the bucket, but I'm a little bit impatient, so I just went ahead and used my soil generator. And again, a soil generator is any box. This is just recycled that has the bottom cut out. There's the bottom cut out, and you can see all the material down in here. You can see the beneficial fungi growing right there. That's some of the white stuff that you see in your bucket, and it's still continuing to grow and break down food. And I'm going to put that in my bed, and that's how I rehabilitate my bed. I go ahead and get the vitamins and nutrients, all the bacteria, fungi, and biologicals from my Bokashi. I use the cover crop as an indicator of how well my soil is doing, and then I turn it all in, and I can plant on top, or I can wait till next year. So I hope that helped you out a little bit. If you have any questions, come see me at prokashi.com. Thanks, guys. See you next time.